I thought I had finally buried the past. Years had gone by since I'd last spoken to my sibling Daniel. Or rather, my estranged sibling. The word still tasted bitter, like something spoiled left too long in the sun. We hadn't parted ways quietly. No, our last encounter had been a storm of screaming voices, accusations, and slammed doors. He left with my parents' curses chasing after him, and I stayed behind, shattered but clinging to what little trust one still had in our family. So when the letter arrived, an unassuming white envelope slipped under my apartment door. I almost didn't open it. There was no return address. The handwriting on the front was jagged, rushed, but unmistakably his. My heart stuttered. Daniel. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time just staring at it. I could almost hear his voice again, that mix of defiance and desperation he had carried the last time I saw him. Memories clawed their way back. The accusations of theft, the will that had mysteriously gone missing, my parents' sharp glares, and finally the day Daniel had been cast out like a criminal. I told myself I had moved on, that he was toxic, that my parents had done the right thing. But my hand trembled as I tore open the envelope. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. No long explanations, no apologies, just a few sentences that made my blood run cold. Meet me. There's something you need to know. Something about the past. About why everything happened. I wasn't the one who betrayed you. Please, just one meeting. At the bottom, a place and time were scribbled. Sunday, 7 p.m., the Old Harbor Cafe. That was it. No signature. But it didn't need one. I knew Daniel's handwriting as well as my own. I sat back in my chair, the letter trembling in my hands. 4 years I had lived with the certainty that he had betrayed me, that he had stolen from our family, lied, and destroyed everything we once had. That's what my parents told me, and I had believed them. After all, parents don't lie about something that big. Right? But the words on this page dripped with desperation. And there was something else. Something I had never seen in Daniel's writing before. Regret. I tried to brush it off. He just wants to manipulate me again, I muttered aloud, as if speaking would silence the storm building inside my head. But no matter how many times I told myself to throw the letter away, my eyes kept drifting back to it. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes I saw Daniel's face. Younger, angrier, but still my brother. The one who used to sneak out of bed with me on summer nights to watch shooting stars from the roof. The one who used to swear he'd always protect me. If he was lying now, if this was just another trick, then why was my chest aching like it wanted to believe him? By Sunday evening, I found myself driving toward the Old Harbor Cafe. My hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. I told myself this was just for closure, that I needed to hear him out once, so I could finally slam the door on this chapter of my life forever. But deep down I already knew the truth. I wasn't looking for closure. I was looking for answers. And something told me that whatever confession Daniel was about to make, it was going to shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. The Old Harbor Cafe hadn't changed in years. Tucked away near the pier, it was the kind of place people forgot existed. Peeling blue paint on the windows, rusty patio chairs, and the faint smell of salt water mixed with coffee. It was quiet, almost too quiet, as though the cafe itself kept secrets. I parked across the street, my pulse hammering as I checked the time. 6:59 p.m. My stomach churned. What if this was a mistake? What if Daniel wasn't here at all, and I was chasing ghosts? But as I stepped inside, the answer was waiting. He was already there. Daniel sat at the farthest corner booth, half hidden by shadows. His shoulders seemed smaller than I remembered. His face sharper, older, worn down by years I hadn't shared with him. A hood covered part of his hair, but when he looked up, those eyes, piercing and familiar, froze me in place. For a moment neither of us spoke. The air felt heavy, like the weight of years pressed down on the table between us. "You came," he finally said, his voice low, raspy, but there was a crack in it. Relief. I slid into the booth, keeping my guard up. "You wanted to meet. So talk." Daniel studied me, almost as if trying to figure out whether I was still the sibling he once knew or just another stranger molded by lies. Then he leaned forward. "I didn't betray you," he said. "It wasn't me." Clenched my jaw. I'd been waiting for that line. The denial. The same tune he always played before everything fell apart. "You expect me to believe that?" Snap. "You stole from Dad. You ruined everything. That's what they told you," Daniel cut in sharply. His voice had an edge now, but his eyes burned with something I couldn't quite place. Anger, yes, but also desperation. "Do you really think I'd throw away my life, my family, you for money? For something I never even touched?" The words hit harder than I wanted them to. I looked away, forcing myself to focus on the scarred wood of the table. "Then explain the missing will. The bank withdrawals. The night you disappeared." Daniel exhaled shakily, running a hand through his hair. "I disappeared because I had no choice. Because the truth would have destroyed me if I stayed." "What truth?" My voice cracked despite myself. For a long moment Daniel said nothing. His hand slipped into his jacket pocket, pulling out an envelope much like the one that had arrived at my door. He pushed it across the table toward me. I hesitated before opening it. Inside were photocopied documents, old bank statements, a few legal papers, and letters written in handwriting I recognized all too well. But it wasn't Daniel's. It was my father's. The documents told a different story. Hidden transfers, assets under false names. And in one letter, my father's own words admitting something I never thought possible. "Daniel will take the fall. He's reckless enough for them to believe it." I felt the world tilt. My throat went dry. This can't be real." Daniel's voice was calm now, but heavy. "It is. They set me up. Mom, Dad, maybe both. I kept quiet because I thought protecting you was worth my silence. But years went by, and all I got in return was being erased from your life. I can't carry it anymore." I stared at him, heart thundering. My parents, the same parents who raised me, who comforted me, who swore Daniel was the villain. Could they really have orchestrated all of this? "Why now?" I whispered. Daniel leaned back, shadows deepening the lines on his face. "Because they're not done. And if you don't know the truth, you're next." His words lingered in the air like smoke. For the first time in years I didn't know who to believe. My brother, sitting across from me with haunted eyes, or my parents, whose voices had shaped my entire reality. But one thing was certain. Whatever Daniel was about to confess next, it was only the beginning. I couldn't sleep that night. After leaving the cafe, I drove aimlessly through the city streets, the envelope Daniel had given me sitting on the passenger seat like a bomb waiting to explode. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every green light like a dare to just keep driving until I disappeared. When I finally parked outside my apartment, I just sat there, staring at the documents again. My father's handwriting leapt out at me. Slanted letters, sharp strokes, all too familiar. It was him. There was no denying it. But if what Daniel said was true, then my entire life had been built on a lie. Barely slept. By morning, my head pounded with a mix of doubt and determination. I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to start. The visit. I drove to my parents' house, the one Daniel and I had both grown up in. It hadn't changed much. The garden still trimmed to perfection, the front porch freshly painted. It looked like stability, like safety, but now all I could see was the mask it wore. Mom opened the door, her expression flickering from surprise to delight. "Sweetheart, what a surprise." I forced a smile, stepping inside. The familiar scent of cinnamon and polish clung to the air. Everything was as it always had been, and yet not at all. "Where's Dad?" "Yes. In his study." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Why?" I shook my head. "Just want to talk." The study was dim, lined with bookshelves that reached the ceiling. Dad sat behind his desk, glasses perched low on his nose as he flipped through paperwork. He looked up with a warm, rehearsed smile. "There's my favorite child," he said. The words felt heavy now, tainted. I sat across from him, my fingers tightening around my bag. Dad, I need to ask you something. About Daniel. His smile faltered just slightly before he set his glasses down. What about him? I swallowed. Did you set him up? The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's face remained composed, but I caught the tiniest twitch in his jaw. Where did you hear something so ridiculous? He finally asked. His tone was calm, almost amused, but his eyes had hardened. I slid the photocopied letter across the desk. He glanced at it, and for the briefest second I saw it. Recognition. Panic. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. This is fake, he said smoothly, pushing it back toward me. Daniel is trying to manipulate you. Don't let him. My heart hammered. So you're saying that's not your handwriting? Dad leaned forward, his voice dropping. I'm saying your brother has always been a liar. He'll say anything to drag us down with him. He ruined his life, and now he wants to ruin yours. The conviction in his voice almost made me believe him. Almost. But I had seen that flicker in his eyes. I knew he was lying. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. If you're hiding something, I'll find it. I won't let this stay buried. Dad's expression darkened, his calm mask slipping just enough for me to see the steel beneath. Be careful where you dig. Some truths aren't meant to be uncovered. Slip. I left the study shaking. Mom was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, her back to me. Everything okay? She asked casually without turning around. Froze. Something about her tone was off. Too casual, too knowing. You knew, I said quietly. Her spoon clattered against the pot. She turned, her face pale. What are you talking about? Daniel. The setup. You were part of it, weren't you? Her lips parted, then pressed shut. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to deny it, but her eyes betrayed her. Wide, fearful, darting to the study door like Dad might hear. I did what I had to, she whispered finally. For this family. For you. My stomach dropped. For me. You destroyed him for me. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't answer. Instead, she turned back to the stove, stirring furiously, as if the conversation had ended. But for me, it had only just begun. The decision. By the time I left the house, the sky was a bruised shade of gray, thunder rumbling in the distance. The storm outside mirrored the one inside me. Daniel had been telling the truth. Our parents, the people I had trusted most in this world, had orchestrated everything. And worse, they were still hiding more. I could feel it. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. If they thought I would back down, they were wrong. I was going to uncover every secret, no matter how deep they'd buried it. Because if Daniel had been sacrificed once, I wasn't going to let it happen again. And as much as it terrified me, I knew this was only the beginning of a much darker truth. The storm that night felt like an omen. Sheets of rain slammed against my window as I sat at my desk, Daniel's envelope spread out in front of me. My parents' faces wouldn't leave my mind. Dad's cold denial, Mom's trembling half-confession. They thought they could intimidate me into silence. They thought I'd turn away like I always did when things got uncomfortable. But this time I wasn't going to. I owed Daniel. And maybe I owed myself too. Digging for the past. The next morning I drove to the county records office. My father had always been meticulous with paperwork. Contracts, land deeds, business partnerships. But I knew if he'd orchestrated Daniel's downfall, traces of it had to exist somewhere. The clerk, a tired-looking man with coffee stains on his shirt, barely glanced at me as I requested files on my father's business dealings from the year Daniel's trial had taken place. Lot of files there, he muttered, disappearing into the back room. While I waited, my stomach churned. My father's voice echoed in my head. Be careful where you dig. Some truths aren't meant to be uncovered. The clerk returned, dropping a stack of folders so heavy the desk groaned. Knock yourself out. I sifted through the files, scanning page after page until my eyes blurred. And then I saw it. buried in a contract amendment. Payout. A transfer. To a man who had testified against Daniel. My pulse quickened. Dad had paid him off. My father hadn't just set Daniel up. He'd bought his conviction. The hidden key. As I copied the documents, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Daniel, you okay? We found something. Dad paid off one of your witnesses. Typing dots blinked, then stopped. A minute later, his reply came. Daniel, I told you. But that's just the start. Check the house. Look in his study. Bottom drawer locked. Froze. My father's study. The one he'd always guarded like a fortress. That room was his kingdom. But if there was more hidden there, I had to find it. That night, under the cover of darkness, I drove back to my parents' house. The break-in. Mom's car was gone. Dad's study light was off. I slipped in through the back door with the spare key they never thought I'd still have. The house felt different now. Cold, unfamiliar. The walls that once held my childhood felt like they were watching me, holding secrets I wasn't meant to know. I crept into the study, every creak of the floorboards making my heart pound. The bottom drawer was locked, just like Daniel said. I rummaged through Dad's desk until I found a small brass key taped under the drawer. Typical Dad, always meticulous, always prepared. The lock clicked open. Inside were files. Dozens of them, bound neatly with string. I pulled the first one free, hands trembling. Bank transfers. Confidential letters. Legal bribes. My father hadn't just framed Daniel. He had built an entire empire on manipulation and deceit. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Photograph. Of me. Younger, maybe 15. Smiling at a school event. On the back, in Dad's handwriting, a single word. Leverage. The confrontation. Before I could process what it meant, the floor creaked behind me. I spun around. Dad stood in the doorway, his face half in shadow. I warned you, he said quietly, almost sadly. Some truths aren't meant to be uncovered. My heart pounded in my throat. What is this? Why do you have this? Why did you do this to Daniel? He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. 'Cause he was weak. Because he would have ruined everything I built. And you? You were always too curious for your own good. My hands tightened around the file. You can't bury this forever. People will know. I'll make sure of it. His smile was thin, chilling. And if you do, what do you think happens to you? To your mother? You think you can carry the weight of this truth without it crushing you? The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in. My father, the man I once admired, was a stranger now. Dangerous one. The escape. I clutched the file and pushed past him, my heart hammering as I fled down the hallway. He didn't stop me. He just watched, his eyes cold, calculating, as if he already knew my next move. When I finally burst into the night air, gasping, rain soaked my face. I ran to my car, clutching the file like a lifeline. As I drove away, one thought consumed me. If my father was willing to destroy Daniel, what else had he done? And worse, what would he do to me now that I had the evidence in my hands? The truth wasn't just buried. It was alive. And it was coming for me. Sleep was impossible that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dad's face. Calm, collected, almost amused as I ran from the house with the stolen files. He hadn't tried to stop me. And that terrified me more than if he had. Because it meant he wasn't afraid. He had a plan. A brother's warning. I called Daniel the next morning. My voice shook as I told him everything. The locked drawer, the bank transfers, the bribes, and the photograph of me labeled leverage. Daniel didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he whispered, "He's marking you. Just like he marked me." "What do you mean?" "He collects weaknesses. He writes them down, hides them away, and when the time comes, he uses them. Against friends, against business partners, against family." That photo. That was a reminder to himself. That no matter how much you thought you were free, he could always turn you into a pawn. His words sent a chill crawling down my spine. First move. By afternoon, I understood what Daniel meant. I stopped by my apartment mailbox and found an envelope. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Photo of me leaving the records office. On the bottom, in block letters, "Stop digging." I froze in the hallway, the noise of the city fading around me. Dad knew my every move. He was watching. And this was his first warning shot. The net tightens. That evening, my boss called me into his office. "Got a strange email today," he said, frowning. "Anonymous. Claimed you've been leaking company information. I don't believe it, but people are asking questions." I stammered, denied everything, but my chest was tight with panic. Of course it wasn't true, but I didn't need to guess who planted it. Dad was dismantling me. Slowly. When I got home, a notice from my bank was waiting. Unusual activity on my account. Thousands of dollars withdrawn in cash I hadn't touched. I sat on the edge of my bed, my whole body trembling. This wasn't just intimidation. It was destruction. He was making me look unstable, untrustworthy, so no one would believe me when I tried to expose him. A phone call. That night my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. When I did, his voice was there. Smooth. Controlled. "I told you not to dig," Dad said. "Now you're drowning in dirt. Why are you doing this?" My voice cracked. "Daniel was your son. I'm your child too. Why ruin us like this?" "You don't understand," he said. "Family isn't blood. Family is control. Without it, you're nothing. Daniel was a liability. You are dangerously close to becoming one." His words cut like glass. "I have the files," I whispered. "If anything happens to me, people will see them." He chuckled softly. "You think you're clever. But what happens when no one trusts you? When everyone believes you're unstable, a thief, may be worse. Evidence doesn't matter if the messenger is ruined." The line clicked dead. Descent into fear. For the next few days, the world closed in around me. Friends stopped answering calls. My landlord suddenly claimed I was behind on rent. Even my closest colleague avoided me with a nervous glance. It was working. Dad's web of influence, carefully spun over decades, was tightening around me. I kept the files hidden in a locked drawer in my apartment, but every creak in the night, every shadow outside my window made me wonder if someone was coming to take them, or worse, to take me. Daniel messaged me constantly. "Don't give up. He's bluffing. He can't destroy both of us." But deep down I wasn't sure. Dad didn't bluff. The breaking point. One evening, after days of relentless pressure, I came home to find my door ajar. My chest clenched as I pushed it open. The apartment was silent, but I knew immediately someone had been inside. My drawer was empty. Files gone. I stumbled back, panic choking me. That was my only proof. Without it, it was just my word against his. My phone buzzed. Another message from the same blocked number. "You had your chance. Now it's mine." My legs gave out and I collapsed onto the floor. My father had outplayed me again. But even in that moment of despair, one thought burned in my chest. He thought he had won. He thought the truth would die buried like before. But this time I wasn't going to let it. This time I would fight back, no matter what it cost me. For hours I sat on the floor, staring at the empty drawer where the files had been. It felt like the last string of hope had been ripped out of me. My father had everything: money, influence, connections, and I had nothing. At least that's what I thought. Then I remembered Daniel's words. He collects weaknesses. He writes them down. If he wrote mine and Daniel's down, he wrote others too. And if I couldn't destroy him with the files I'd taken, maybe I could destroy him with the files he kept for himself. The hidden weakness. Called Daniel, my voice shaking. "The files are gone. He took them." Silence. Then Daniel said, "Then we hit back where it hurts most." He told me about a place. An old office Dad used to use when he didn't want the family to know his business. A storage unit dressed up as a consultancy. Daniel had followed him there once, years ago. If the files exist, that's where they'll be, Daniel said. He doesn't just use dirt. He hoards it. My heart pounded. Breaking in would be risky, dangerous, illegal. But it was the only way. The break-in. The storage facility was on the edge of the city, hidden between warehouses and loading docks. I waited until nightfall, then slipped inside, my hoodie pulled low. The lock on the office door was newer than the building. Reinforced. I almost turned back, until I saw a keypad smudged with fingerprints. My hands shook as I punched in the numbers I thought my father would use. Birthdays, anniversaries, business codes. On the fifth try, the lock clicked. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust. Old filing cabinets lined the walls, and in the center sat a heavy desk with drawers. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. I pulled open drawers, flipped through folders, scanned ledgers. The deeper I went, the more my stomach turned. Blackmail, payoffs, fake contracts, photographs, names I recognized, politicians, lawyers, even family friends. And then, at the very bottom, a folder labeled Leverage, Children. My hands trembled as I flipped it open. Inside were pages on me. And Daniel. On our half-sister Emma. Notes about our habits, our secrets, our vulnerabilities. Dates, bank accounts, medical records. He had catalogued us like assets. But that wasn't all. In the back, clipped to Emma's page, was something that made my blood run cold. A deed to a property in her name, signed and dated 2 years ago. The same year she'd suddenly cut ties with Dad. Except the signature wasn't hers. It was forged. The first strike. I took photos of everything. Every document, every name, every signature. My phone was filled with evidence that could topple him. But I knew better than to confront him directly. Not yet. So I went to Emma. She opened the door cautiously, her eyes widening when she saw me. We hadn't spoken in years, not since she'd left the family without explanation. "What do you want?" she asked coldly. I handed her my phone. She scrolled through the images, her face paling as she reached the deed with her forged signature. Her hands shook. I didn't know he still had this. Still? Yes. She looked at me, tears brimming in her eyes. I left because he tried to ruin me. He forged that deed, then told me if I didn't play by his rules, he'd bury me under fake debt and stolen property. I ran before he could. I swallowed hard. Emma hadn't betrayed us. She had escaped. Now together we could fight back. A dangerous plan. That night Emma, Daniel, and I sat around her kitchen table. For the first time in years, the three of us were united. "He thinks he's untouchable," Daniel said, his jaw clenched. "But if we release this all at once—" "No," Emma interrupted. "He'll spin it. He always spins it. We need timing. Precision. If we leak it in pieces to the right people, he won't know where it's coming from. By the time he scrambles, the next hit will land." I nodded slowly. Like a trap. One pressure point at a time. "And," Emma added, her voice hard, "we need someone on the inside. Someone close to him who's waiting for a reason to turn." Daniel leaned back, a grim smile forming. "I might know someone. Call." As we finalized the plan, my phone buzzed again. Another blocked number. I put it on speaker. Dad's voice filled the room. "You've been busy. Digging again." None of us spoke. "You think you've won because you found my files? Because you've dragged your siblings into your little rebellion? Cute." He paused, his voice lowering into a growl. "But let me remind you, every move you make, I already calculated years ago. You're not players in this game. We're pawns. And pawns are disposable." The line went dead. We sat in silence. For the first time I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just a battle for truth anymore. It was a war. And only one side would survive. The night after Dad's call, I barely slept. His words echoed in my head. "Every move you make, I already calculated years ago." But this time, I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Because for the first time I wasn't alone. Daniel sat on one side of me, Emma on the other. For years we had been isolated, pawns on his board. Now, united we were something he could never control, a team. And together, we had the one thing he couldn't bury. The truth. Emma, always the sharpest, leaned over the table. Step 1, she said, tapping her pen. We leak the forged deed to the state auditor. Quiet. Legal. He won't be able to sweep it away. Daniel smirked. Step 2, I contact Victor, Dad's old partner. The one he betrayed. He's been waiting years for payback. He nodded. Step 3. We time the biggest hit for his charity gala. The night he pretends to be a saint. Emma's eyes lit up. Poetic. And so the plan began. The leak worked. Within days, Dad was under quiet investigation for fraud. His lawyers scrambled, but they couldn't stop what was spreading. For once, he wasn't in control. Then Daniel struck gold. Victor handed us emails, recordings, contracts, proof of everything. Years of Dad's corruption in black and white. Your father thinks he's untouchable, Victor sneered. Let's prove him wrong. Finally, it was the night of the gala. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and champagne. Politicians, CEOs, socialites, everyone praising my father. On stage he smiled, flawless in his tuxedo. To family, legacy, and the future we build. Then a silence. The projector screen flickered. Image after image appeared. The forged deed. The blackmail notes. The secret accounts. Files labeled leverage. Children. Gasps tore through the crowd. Whispers spread. Phones came out. Dad froze. His perfect mask shattered. He barked at the control booth, but it was too late. The truth was everywhere. Kiss. Reporters rushing. Donors storming out. Lawyers whispering frantically. And him, trembling, scanning the room. And then, his eyes met mine. For the first time in my life, I didn't see power in his gaze. Saw fear. The empire collapsed fast. Investigations launched. Counts frozen. Deals destroyed. By month's end, the man who once bragged he controlled everything had nothing. And us. Emma came home. Not to him but to herself. Daniel finally stood in his own light. And me. I wasn't the outcast anymore. I wasn't the weak link. I was the one who helped bring him down. Weeks later the phone rang again. A blocked number. Answered. His voice was weaker now, stripped of its arrogance. You think you've won, he rasped. You think you're free. Without me you're nothing. Without my name, you don't exist. Pause. Then calmly replied. No, Dad. We finally exist because of what we did without you. And I hung up. That day I realized something. He had always treated us like pawns. But pawns, when united, can become something else. They can topple a king.